The Gospel according to Luke, chapter 9.
Glory to you, O God.
About 8 days after Jesus said these things, he took Peter, John, and James and went up on a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes flashed white like lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, were talking with him. They were clothed with heavenly splendor and spoke about Jesus' departure, which he would achieve in Jerusalem. Peter and those with him were almost overcome by sleep, but they managed to stay awake and saw his glory, as well as the 2 men with him. As the 2 men were about to leave Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it's good that we're here. We should construct 3 shrines, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But he didn't know what he was saying. Peter was still speaking when a cloud overshadowed them. As they entered the cloud, they were overcome with awe. Then a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." Even as the voice spoke, Jesus was found alone. They were speechless and at the time told no one what they had seen. The next day, when Jesus, Peter, John, and James had come down from the mountain, a large crowd met Jesus. A man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to take a look at my son, my only child. Look, a spirit seizes him, and without any warning he screams. It shakes him and causes him to foam at the mouth. It tortures him and rarely leaves him alone. I begged your disciples to throw it out, but they couldn't." Jesus answered, "You faithless and crooked generation, how long will I be with you and put up with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon threw him down and shook him violently. Jesus spoke harshly to the unclean spirit, healed the child, and gave him back to his father. Everyone was overwhelmed by God's greatness.
There's a famous German play, Dr. Faust. In that play, you meet a young scholar. He's very smart, like a genius, and he tries to figure out the whole world. He wants to get to the bottom of things, to the bottom of the universe. So he tries that with education. He studies math, medicine, philosophy, theology, law, all those things. But even with all that knowledge, he still feels he has not found what he's really looking for. And so his entrance monologue ends, "And here, poor fool, I stand once more, no wiser than I was before." Because, as we find out as the play goes on, what Dr. Faust is really trying to find is not so much knowledge, but what he's looking for is the one moment where all things fall into place. That one moment when all the mysteries are solved, all the questions answered, and there is just pure happiness. And as Dr. Faust can't find it through studies, he then makes a deal with Mephistopheles, that is the devil, and he says to him, "If to the moment I should say, 'Abide, you are so fair, put me in fetters on that day, I wish to perish, then I swear.'" So if the devil kind of makes him get that moment, he will give his soul to the devil. Well, I won't tell you the whole story, but you can imagine if you make a deal with the devil, it never ends well. So there is no happy ever after in that play. It was written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, a very famous German author, 200 years ago. But it's still played on many stages, and it's pretty popular and successful. And one reason is sure it's very well written, all in rhymes, But I think it's also popular because we can relate to that young man, to his struggle to find meaning, to solve all the issues, to find that moment of pure happiness and fulfillment. Of course, for us Christians and for us regular guys, we don't study like 10 different subjects. That's a bit much. And it's not so much knowledge, but it's actually our faith that we hope provides those answers. That in us, for us, we find it in God, the happiness and joy we're looking for. So as we journey through our lives, we look for signs for God's presence, for God's guidance, and for his answers. And we do find them, always tiny little glimpses, like little places, and in very different moments and places. In a book I read quite a while ago, an author described how she climbed the high mountains in the Swiss Alps. And when she finally arrived on one of the peaks, she had an overwhelming feeling of awe and joy. That view of the majestic mountains and the lovely valleys filled her with awe for God's creation. And for one precious moment, she said, she felt even a little closer to God up there. We look for moments where we can feel close to God, where we might see God's salvation, God's love and compassion revealed to us. And if only for a moment, we would know for sure, we would be 100% certain that God is present and that he has a plan for us and for our lives. We long for those moments, but we can't create them. They are gifts from the Holy Spirit. They may or may not come. And if they do, they probably come in moments when we least expect them. And it's not that we have to climb on high mountains or travel to distant places to discover God's presence. God's presence can show up in miserable moments in our normal everyday lives. I remember a story of a congregation member she lived in Eastern Europe, and as a young woman, she was forced to labor for the Germans in a coal mine. And the story was heartbreaking. Life was miserable for her. They didn't get enough food, and at a moment when she was ready to give up on her life because she was nearly starving, there was not much to live for, she remembers a day when one of the guards took her aside when she came in the morning, and he took her aside and gave her a big piece of bread. And she said she felt God was there, right with them. Or I remember a youth retreat like the one we had this weekend a while ago, many years ago actually. And one of the youth said to her mother after the retreat, you know, when we talked about the Lord's Prayer, for a moment I did feel that God is there. We can't feel God's presence we can feel God's presence in all the different places. And one of them is certainly worship. When we just sit here in the congregation in the presence of God. And sometimes God's presence can be revealed in the scriptures or in a hymn verse or in a prayer. God promised to come to us in bread and wine. And there are so many stories about those special moments. If we would gather all our special moments here, there would be many stories to tell. And those are gifts from God. Today, of course, Peter, John, and James had one of those special moments when they were on the mountaintop with Jesus. They saw the heaven open. They saw the white light shining on Jesus. They heard God speaking with Jesus. And I'm sure they never forgot that moment. And I'm sure they told friends and families over and over again. That was the most amazing day I've ever had. It blew me away. But that moment was also a gift. Not all the disciples were up there, just a few. And there was nothing they probably did to deserve that. It was just a gift. They were allowed to see God's love for Jesus, and it reassured them that it had been the right thing to follow Jesus. It had been the right thing to give up their jobs, their family, and follow him. And that hour up on the mountain also prepared them for what was to come. To walk and stay with Jesus all the way, even when they had to see that God's plan with Jesus was so different than what they had expected and what they actually had hoped for. They were granted a glimpse of what was eventually to come. The moment on the hill was a little foretaste of Easter. Jesus shining in the white light, God's voice reassuring them that Jesus is his beloved Son. They get to see that in the end, it's not darkness, but light that will win. It's not death, but life that will have the last word. For Peter, John, and James, it was one of those moments they wanted to last forever. And that's why Peter says to the other two, "Lord, it is well that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 booths, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." It's as if he wanted to say, let's stop time and hang on this moment forever. Let's set aside all the troubles of life and all the burdens of our souls. Let's forget about the struggles of the world. Let's leave our fears behind. Up here, there are no tears, there is no illness, no insecurities, no fears, no anxieties or doubts. This is heaven. We've been waiting for this. Let's keep that moment of divine presence forever. But Jesus simply says, "Get up, let's go down. This is not the place to stay. We are needed at the bottom of the mountain, but don't be afraid." Jesus leads them back to where they had come from, back to the other disciples. And we heard, as soon as they arrived down at the foot of the mountain, they found a boy who had epileptic seizures. He even fell into the fire. In other words, the disciples returned right from the mountaintop experience to face the problems of regular life again. But they were changed. And when Jesus healed the boy, they knew God is with us in our world, our pains, our needs, our hopes and dreams. And of course, the same is true for us as well. God is present among us as we gather for worship, but also during the week, when we go about our regular stuff during the week or here in the church. Today, we will install the new church council, and we know that a committee meeting, a board meeting may not be exactly the situation when most of us would expect God to reveal his love and salvation to us. But then it might just be the perfect moment. The story of Transfiguration is about seeing God clearly and being changed because of it. Here in worship, we celebrate the glory of God. But God's glory is also revealed in the way we conduct our businesses, in the way we live our lives, in the way we encourage and inspire each other and make our decisions with the needs of God's people in heart and mind. So the evidence of faith is found in our love for God, in our compassion for each other and our church, in the good we bring to the world in God's name. And our spiritual growth is not measured by how frequent or how intense our mountaintop experiences are, but actually also by how faithfully we live and love, pray, and care for the rest of the time. Amen.